Jake.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. Oh, let me turn my volume up. Sorry. I always have my volume down and I think there's something wrong with the audio and it's because I don't have the volume up. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you.
You too. I am a definite cat lady, wholeheartedly. I love cats. So of course, I knew from reading about it that I was really going to enjoy your film. And there's so much I want to ask you about, but firstly, I just want to know how you came up with the idea to do shedding.
Shedding was an idea that sprung up from a couple different sources kind of coming together. The big one was really just kind of living with my cats. We have 3, and Panda is the star of this movie, and Apollo is one of the co-stars. A lot of it came from kind of observing him and watching him and just thinking about what it would be like to, live in our, apartment here in the city, and like look outside the window and kind of fantasize about, people passing by and what life must be like out there. And there's been times when we like pick him up and carry him outside and he seems to want to come back in. So he's had his chance. But just kind of thinking about like seeing him dream, thinking about what his hopes and dreams might be, just was kind of dwelling on that. And then also kind of asking the question, well, what would ever cause him to actually go out and be able to experience all these things he's only ever imagined? And I was just thinking one day, it's like, well, if he turned into a person, then he'd be able to get out. And it's like, who would he meet? And, how would they respond? And who would, be scared of him? Who would accept him? And just kind of answering those different questions kind of led along to this kind of the rough outline of the story when we started filming. The other thing that really got this going was experimenting and playing around with different filmmaking tools, like some of the iPhone apps that have been released within the last 5 to 10 years. And of course, the cats were always ready and willing subjects to just kind of play around with camera attachments and lenses and things like that. And so after about 2 years of essentially like filming them, knowing I wanted to do something with this footage, the feature film idea came, and then I started, cutting together the footage to be able to put that together and tell a story just by watching what the animals were doing and trying to figure out like, what do they want and what stands in the way and how are they going to accomplish their goal.
I love that you filmed it on an iPhone. I think that to me, that's amazing. And because you watching it, it's nothing that would ever occur to you. Oh, this was filmed on a phone. But it just makes to me filmmaking so much more accessible. Because I remember years ago, even being in film school, and it was always on film, and it was so pricey to make anything, which is such a shame because there's so many good stories. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about filming on iPhone and like how you did that and what, if you like you're talking about apps and what things were helpful to you.
The things that were helpful to us with the iPhone filming were the 2 main apps that we used. One was called Filmic Pro. Tangerine was filmed on it. There's been a number of other films that have used it as well. That's great just because it gives you much better control over technical things like frame rate and then also focus and the iris and exposure than like other, just like the standard camera app does or other apps as well. And so you could really control the image and control the focus. So if you needed to get up close, back further away, do some like rack focus things with the phone, that was a great tool to do that. The other app we used was 8mm. So for a lot of Panda's dream sequences in the film, it was that, which had this great quality of just aging things and making it very dreamlike, very hazy, the way memory or sleep can kind of distort your sense of reality and what you're seeing. So we're playing around a lot with that. And then my wife, Erin, who is also the producer on this, we got some lenses that could help with macro shots really up close, some wide things, some telephoto ones, from a company called Clip when we were filming with iPhone 6 on this particular movie. So those would like attach right on. You could adjust based on what lens you were using. There's other ones like Moondog has their anamorphic lens, which I haven't had a chance to use yet, and other companies that have some great lens attachments that you can use for film, for phone as well.
I love it. It's just so incredible to me because when you remember like the first phones and how low quality is. I never would think that you were able to get to a point where we film on the phones, which is, I just love it. And I love everything about it.
And one of the other big advantages with that too was when like working with the animals, like Panda was the one who kind of, as I would like, you know, creep up close to him or like have it like here or further back, he pretty much does his own thing and would just
Yeah,
kind of like ignore me. And, you know, some of our other cats that we have would get curious and smell it. And so like there's a lot of footage of them getting up close like this with their eye and their nose
it's
into,
adorable.
yeah. And so, but he would just kind of like, all right, you know, what, you know, you do what you do. I'm just going to keep like eating, drinking, napping, sleeping and whatever. So he was the most natural, I'll say.
I mean, I love, of course, I love the cat footage. I love that you filmed it low, like a cat. It's just so cute. And it even when God, the actor you got who played Panda in the film, Lex.
Lex Quarterman was our actor. Yes, he played the cat in human form.
Well, first of all, I love like you were talking about the dream sequences and the dream sequences he has, and then you kind of cut to the footage of Panda, um, or what he's thinking about as a human, and the kind of thinking about being a cat. But Lex did a great job. And how I just was curious, how is it directing an actor to portray an animal?
So I chose Lex specifically. He was actually the first person I thought of for this, and then a lot of the story, because I had kind of broad strokes in mind, and I really started drafting and writing the script after only he was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. That sounds great. And Lex was excited to do it because he is a trained mime and a trained acrobat. So he's, and also has been in bodybuilding competitions in the past. So one, he's very used to silent performance. Two, he has a lot of control over what his body is doing because of like different things. And also three, he's not shy to be in his wrestling shorts out on the street for some of the shots that we were doing. So as I was first talking to him, he came to my mind because there was a short film that went to Sundance several years ago in which he was in, and he played an ape. And so I had seen that, and I remember that. I was like, oh, he would say yes, he might like this. And so he was like, yes, that sounds exciting. And so he watched a lot of footage that I had gotten with the cats previously. And he told me, he was like, I'm going to focus this on playing that cat, not just kind of general activities and behaviors, but be like, you know, try to get more into like his behavior and more of his personality. And so he was doing that. And then we kind of developed this language about like, you know, the pace, the tempo. We tried different movements out with some test footage before to see what looked good and what didn't work as well. And then kind of went from there.
Because yeah, because he moves so well. Like he does such a great job. Even in like one of the I think one of maybe is the opening shot of him when he wakes up as a human. Even the close up of his eyes and how they're moving was very cat-like.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's
just
pretty
yeah.
incredible and special to find someone who's able to do that. Because I have to think that would be. I've never acting's never been my thing, and I'm not an actor. But to me, that probably is has to be a very difficult thing to
Yeah.
portray that. I love though too the film how it deals with family dysfunction and loss and almost desire of things you want. And I thought that was such a it was beautifully portrayed and such it was just a really sweet film. It's such a nice element. What made you want to kind of go in that direction in terms of the story?
I went with that direction in terms of the story because I think as I was realizing or thinking about some of the people he might meet outside, it would be interesting if there was someone who took him in because he reminded them of someone who they had just lost. And it kind of let from like a logical, natural progression from there. And I really love like either fantasy stories, fairy tale stories, or sci-fi stories, even in which, you know, some crazy fantastical thing, or even sometimes like some absurd or surreal thing might happen. But in the end, you kind of know that it happened for a reason and that like it was a good thing that this happened, even if you can't explain everything and understand fully why. You knew like if you can't understand the particulars about how it came to pass, you understand why it had to come to pass and things like that. So I think that's why I responded to the idea of like a family coming together just because this person who they thought they were never going to see again came back into their lives, and one person needed that, one person needed to have better closure about that.
I love how you put that because I do think it's a film you don't like. I never once watching it was, I didn't need to know why it happened and like the particulars of why this happened and how they like that was never a thing that needed to happen. And it was very fairy tale like to me in the way like this event happens and it's to better everybody in it, even Panda gets to
Yeah, yeah.
experience.
I like to think he comes to appreciate the life that he had before, even when he, like,
Yes.
almost like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz.
Oh, absolutely. It totally, absolutely. And I kind of love that kind of story where like this like strange occurrence happens and then everybody kind of gets that closure they need and then things go on.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought there was a real beauty and sweetness to it. How
Thank
was,
you.
oh, of course. And how was the other two actresses, you had the mother and the daughter, how did they approach the roles in acting with Lex? Of course, he's a guy, but he. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because he told me afterwards that it was really hard on him in particular, and I realized this I think when I was directing some scenes with Jacquelyn where like they have to have a conversation with someone, and he can't respond, and he can't even respond emotionally. And Lex told me afterwards, he was like, that was really difficult for me because like I wanted to empathize with like this person and that and, like this character. I want to empathize with that character, but I couldn't because like as you know who I am, like you pretty much like stay pretty plain faced throughout the entire time. And he expressed more difficulty with that than either Karla or Jacquelyn did necessarily. And afterwards I had to be like, let them know like, by the way, I'm kind of amazed that you were able to carry on these dialogue scenes with someone who in many ways was completely unresponsive. Not necessarily a complete brick wall, but at least not responsive the way that you're typically used to when you have only one other actor in the scene and you know they're not going to say anything or necessarily like, you know, show any type of emotional reaction to what you're saying. And which I think actually is why like some things that Lex did in the movie, he improvised to kind of do the emoting, because there's a scene at the end where the daughter character is talking to him, and spoilers, like for those who haven't seen, she's basically using him as a way to say goodbye to a brother because that's who he looks like in human form. Lex bends forward and bumps his forehead against hers as a way of like showing affection and acceptance, and he improvised that. That was not in the script.
Yeah, I see. That was one of the moments I thought was so sweet when they did touch heads. Yeah, you're what we were saying. I have to admit, yeah, it has to be a definitely different situation because I think acting, like they always say, so much about acting is reacting, and it's you're used to human facial expressions and you just in life when you're talking to somebody and kind of reading those, and his expressions in it are very cat-like. So it's not a normal, but it's done so well, and I do love that moment. That was one of my favorite moments that you had just talked about when their heads touched. Because it does remind you of like I've always had cats, and like when you like the cat rubs against you if you're upset or something, and there's just such a sweetness to it. I just
Yeah, you know, they'll sneak up on you and they'll just like bump in. And say, oh, hey, yes, there you are, yes.
How does Panda like the film? More importantly,
I think he wants more screen time. Unfortunately, okay. Yes, but
well,
next time, yeah.
What do you hope that audiences get from your film?
I hope that audiences enjoy the film. I hope that they're left with a sense of like peace, and I hope that they come to just, I hope that they like can look around and be like, you know, well, two things. I hope that audiences can kind of look around and like appreciate, like sometimes like as people like we long for things like how they used to be, particularly with the world is right now, kind of looking off to things that might, you know, be seen out of reach or something, but just kind of just like, you know, just because some things seem impossible, you know, there's stuff like right in front of you that you might be able to appreciate, use, like don't neglect the life you have because you're dreaming and longing for a life that seems impossible, out of reach. And that actually goes in hand with the filmmaking too, because rather than like a lot of, you know, traditional raising money and going to investors and all this stuff for the independent film, we were like, I was basically looking around being like, okay, so what do I have? I know these people, I have these pets, I have this camera, and just started making something with a kind of a vague idea of what the end game was, but then just kind of going step by step.
I love that because I think people get all the time so wrapped up in well, they're talking about probably life and in entertainment, definitely they want to make something and they get so caught up in the details and the particulars of trying to get something made that it never gets made. And there's a point I think where you just have to do it, which you've done very well. And it's just such a sweet film. I really enjoyed it a lot. And there's so many.
Well, that is something I definitely.
Oops, sorry, everybody. Uh-oh. Second. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now? Or
I can still hear and see you if you.
Okay, sorry, my internet just like froze up for a second.
Down.
Let me switch it really fast. It should. Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I had a little snafu with the internet there. It wasn't behaving.
No, it's that time of the night when everyone's watching Queen's Gambit right now.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I hope they watch your film. They could watch.
Yes.
Because it's a really sweet. I just really enjoyed it. I love the fact that there isn't a lot of dialogue, which I liked a lot because just to watch it, I don't know, it was a real treat. It was a real treat, and
I mean, definitely. Yeah, one of my other favorite aspects of the movie was the composer Robert Allaire. The score that he did was just wonderful, and we had a temp score in there while we were doing the rough cuts, and then like he said, "Oh, this is a good temp score," and then he showed us some of the first earlier tracks, and I was so happy with what everything was like. As soon as he gave me the entire score, I was like, "Can you give me a version that I can listen to in my iTunes library?" And he was like, "Absolutely, here." Yeah,
it is a great score. I mean, it had to be for it to work because there is just for the whole the natural aspect of it. Lex isn't talking it, so if you had a bad score, it wouldn't work. And he did an incredible job.
Yeah, and we figured out eventually, we were like, oh, the music is his voice, isn't it? Because it's, basically talking for him. And there's even like a long stretch of like 6 or 7 minutes in the movie where his character is absent and there's no score during that time. And it was just later on we realized that it's like, oh yeah, because he's absent, so it doesn't really make sense to have any music here.
I love that. I have to go back and watch that because I want to. I remember it, but now that you mentioned it, I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of the thing. It just naturally works, but you don't like specifically think about it when you're watching it. Now, like, I'm gonna go.
Right.
Shit.
Well, we didn't think about when we were making it. And
I love
that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And where can people watch it right now?
People can watch Shedding on iTunes, Apple TV, Amazon. They can also go to Vudu, Fandango Now. If they have on demand, it's also on demand as well. So it's all over the place. Well,
I definitely look forward to seeing what other films you have in the future. And
thank you.
And tell Panda he did a great job. I think he's adorable, and I enjoyed all the footage of him very much. And Apollo too.
Yes. We gave them lots of treats, and they'll get some more.
They work for cheap. That's good.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Jake. I really enjoyed this, and thank you for talking with me.
My pleasure, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
You have a great evening.
You too. You as well.
Thanks.